คุณคิมวอลเกอร์
A very warm welcome to you to our show, Kun Kim.
Sabadi Bimai.
Sawadee Peemai. Happy New Year. So are we going to switch to Thai or?
Oh, no. Please don't.
So I was referring to the song. It's a different kind of silver. The one we heard in the song by Aretha Franklin. That's sort of like, giving our country a hope.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But
We pray for that.
Yeah, but the silver, this one, your organization, it has something to do with our hair color.
Yes, indeed. It's about the subject that a lot of people don't want to talk about, and that's the subject of aging.
Oh.
And, of course, I think in the world there are several megatrends right now. One of them is, of course, global warming, the environment issue. And the other one is the aging of the populations across most of the world. In fact, not just the developed world, but the developing world is also experiencing extraordinary aging. In the words of the United Nations, they say it's unprecedented in the history of mankind. Now, there's not many things that you can say that about. That's an extraordinary claim. So just like the environment is being degraded, we have a situation where our societies are getting older. And, the world as we know it, our modern world, has been designed by and for younger people to live in. And that means our buildings, our pathways, our shopping centres, our technology, everything has been designed with a younger person in mind. And yet we see this huge growth of older people in terms of numbers across the world, across Asia and certainly in Thailand. And I fear that businesses and governments are being very slow to wake up to this. And so my mission
in
as
general,
a company,
right? Not just any particular government.
No. I think there are certain governments around the world that have really grasped this issue. They are the ones that are being hit by it the most.
Let me guess, Japan?
Japan is a super age society. Germany would be up there. I think the UK and Canada are also examples of governments that really have grasped the issue. They are making great progress. France as well, Australia to some degree. Asian countries, by and large, with the exception of Japan, are lagging behind. But they are trying to catch up very fast. China, for example, has one of the fastest aging societies on the planet, largely because of their one-child policy.
One-child policy.
But that's now, going to impact them. Because it means the shrinking workforce, and they are going to have to do things about this. I mean, for example, the situation of retirement homes in China right now is dire, and the government has now woken up to this, and they're trying to solve that problem now.
So that's the rationale behind the existence of your organization.
Yes, indeed. Yes. It's one of those topics that most people, even the older people, I find, don't want to talk about. They don't like to admit the fact that they're getting old. Nobody likes to admit the fact that they're getting old.
I'm going to have to agree on that.
But, the fact of the matter is, from about the age of 50, two things start to change. Our psychology, the way we think about things, and our physiology, most importantly our physiology, because of course people at all ages have different psychological profiles. They may be early adopters of technology or whatever, and those things don't tend to change with age. For example, the correlation of people who use the internet is more a function of wealth than it is of age, for example. But what we find is that the physiology, things that go wrong with the human body, are things that, with the exception of Botox and those sorts of remedies,
defying gravity.
Ultimately, you can't beat gravity. You just can't beat gravity. And but the things that do start to go wrong, the thing that we notice probably first is greying of the hair. And of course, there's a multi-billion-dollar industry to combat that, with, hair colour for men and women. The decline in eyesight, which starts at around 45 usually. And of course, that in itself is a huge industry. And just in the same way, what I've done, what I and a colleague have done in my business is we've codified 25 of these things that go wrong with the human body. 25. Of course, there's many, many, many more. But 25 key things that cover the sensory issues.
That's already a lot.
It's depressing. I have to admit, it's very depressing. When I wrote the book about it, I tell you, I needed to go out and go for long walks as therapy. But it includes the five senses. So the smell, taste, touch, hearing, sight. All of those things start to deteriorate to a certain degrees. And then there's the physical things, like your physical strength. The dexterity of the fingers, for example, use of mobile phones is affected by that. It's the flexibility of the human body, and so forth. And flexibility, for example, would have a ramification for dressing rooms in retail stores. You know, how many times have you been in a retail store and you go into the dressing room and there's nowhere to sit down? Now, as a younger person, that's not such a problem. But you get into your 50s and 60s and 70s, you know, that becomes quite a physical challenge, something that people should not have to endure. And so my business, if you like, my philosophy is that we need to understand all of those 25 effects of aging and rethink the way we deliver services, the way we meet the needs of our citizens, our employees and our customers, and do that in a way that will make it beneficial for everybody. I mean, what we say, in my favourite expression, is if you design for the young, you'll exclude the old. If you design for the old, you'll include everybody.
So your customers are maybe the governments or the business?
Both. Yes.
Okay.
And
what do you provide, like information for them? What does Silver do?
Okay, we do a number of things because the issue itself is so vast and so embryonic. Surprisingly, it's kind of like where the environmental issues were maybe 10, 15 years ago. Everyone knows about it, but no one really knows what to do. And as a consequence, the approaches vary by the governments, by the specific problems that they may have and their degree of development and evolution, and by companies, depending on their, you know, what product or service sector they operate in and so on. Because obviously there are certain products and services that are more affected by this earlier on than others. You know, for example, banking and finance is one, particularly because of the concentration of wealth in older people. I think the travel and tourism sector is hugely influenced by this, and you know, it's a favourite topic of mine. And obviously healthcare. But you know, from the perspective of Thailand, you have domestic healthcare issues, you know, so that there is a need to take care of the local population, but also, of course, and I know that the hospitals here are very alert to this, you have medical tourism, which of course is a huge revenue generator for the economy. So they're the sorts of things that we look at in the macro sense. And in the micro sense, what we will do often is we'll go into an organisation and we will apply those 25 effects of ageing across the entire customer or citizen experience. So, for example, right now in the midst of doing one for one of the world's leading hotel groups, and I visit the hotels and I go through the whole process of searching online, looking at their advertisements, searching online, going to their website, then booking in, going to the hotel, checking in, staying in the room, visiting their gym, their sauna, their swimming pool, their restaurant, and so forth and so on. And we've developed an iPad app that applies these 25 effects of aging across every single step of that journey. And there's about, in the current audit we're doing now, it's about 300 individual steps that we're talking about. And we look at things like the level of lighting in the restaurants, you know, whether the menu is visible, you know, because it's not just a question of the size of the type, it's a question of the lighting. If the type is big, but the lighting is dim. You still can't read it. And we look at things like ambient noise levels in department stores, because one of the other issues we look at is cognitive things, you know, the cognitive issues of aging. And one of those is, it gets quite technical, but it's referred to as cognitive filtering. And as people get older, the ability for them to filter out sights and sounds that are not relevant, not important, becomes more difficult. And it's one reason why older people sometimes can't explain it, but they don't like going into noisy bars anymore, because they can't hear the conversation. Because they can't filter out the background noise from the conversation they're supposed to be listening to. And another practical application of that would be in the retail store. So if the background noise is too rowdy, or even the ambient noise of traffic or whatever, it's going to be more difficult for them to concentrate on what the salesperson is trying to sell them. In an online sense, and I know that Thailand is not quite at the same level of penetration of online as some other Western societies, but still it's growing very, very fast. And most websites are not built with these issues in mind. And the cognitive filtering comes in here in a visual sense, because websites that use too much flash animation or distracting imagery are going to distract that consumer, that customer, from the main purpose that you've set that website up to achieve. And that has commercial ramifications.
That seems to be very detailed. So how can you convince your customer, maybe the business or the government, to do this?
It's a wonderful question, Mickey.
I mean, big budget for this.
Yes, it is. I mean, you know, although you know, because it's embryonic business, we don't charge a McKinsey rate. But yes, it is very specialised. But for certain businesses, this is critical, and it has proven return on investment.
So you work, or you position yourself as a consultant.
Absolutely.
Providing this information.
That's exactly
right. So they incorporate this into their business strategy.
You know, the thing is that if it's done properly and done early enough, this costs companies very, very little. And I'll give you an example. I stay in a hotel in London when I visit there, and recently they went through a massive refurbishment. Now, if you work out the cost of refurbishment per room, I would guess they probably spent $30 million US, easily $30 million US dollars on this hotel. And yet the first time I went back into that hotel, I could go snap, snap, snap. I could immediately see 3 or 4 or 5 things that were not age-friendly, things that were going to pose a problem for their older guests. And you think how stupid that is. If they had invested a little bit of energy and time and talked to us beforehand, we would have been able to say, look, be careful of the material you choose for the flooring. That shelf there is going to be a problem. The lighting needs to be by the bedside so people can read, etc., etc. And that would have cost them virtually no extra, but it would have saved them in the long run in terms of customer satisfaction. And the same thing goes for buildings, for hotels that are being constructed from scratch, or almost any infrastructure project. I would say anyone who is investing in large capital expense, whether it's a structure, a product or a service, would be very, very wise to consider the needs of older people as they invest in these things, because the depreciation time, the period over which that investment will be depreciated, is going to be 10, 20, sometimes 30 years. Now, in that time, in 30 years from now, 37% of the population of Thailand will be over the age of 50. 37%. And 17% will be over 65. So, you know, these are large numbers, you know, particularly when you talk about the size of population of Thailand, which is very large.
ค่ะต้องสรุปกันก่อนค่ะเป็นภาษาไทย